COVID-19.
I don't think it's the end of the world. People stop drinking at 11.
The source of the spikes that we're seeing now is not originating from restaurants and bars.
No more booze sales after 11 p.m., and that's not the only change starting tomorrow when it comes to bars, restaurants, and even strip clubs. Plus,
I thought it was an interesting offer that I'm not doing.
Well, they've never really needed us like this before, so I've never heard of anything like this.
They haven't taught in decades, but a teacher shortage has school boards across Ontario begging for them to return to the classroom. And it has no owner but owes the city hundreds of thousands in back taxes. The story behind this thin stretch of land in Forest Hill that could soon be up for auction. Breaking news to start the show tonight. The city's medical officer of health is ordering 4 Toronto businesses to shut down, saying they pose a risk and safety to residents. They haven't identified the businesses, but say they are in the hospitality industry. They're being served orders to shut down over the next few hours. After that, they'll be releasing the names and locations of each business to the public.
In some instances, people infected with COVID-19 were employed at more than one of the 4 locations. In another instance, one of the businesses served food buffet style, which is clearly prohibited under existing provincial regulations to limit the spread of COVID-19. Second, the operators of these businesses were frequently uncooperative with our investigators. We also became aware of concerns that staff were being pressured to work while ill.
Now, none of these businesses will be able to reopen until they meet certain conditions. It's just one of several measures taken by officials today to fight surging infections. New COVID-19 cases in Ontario are once again back over 400 today, prompting the province to restrict bars and restaurants from serving alcohol after 11 p.m. They are also shutting down strip clubs. Philip Lee now with more details on the changes.
Bars and restaurant owners say they're doing their part, masking, distancing, limiting the number of customers they serve, but they're paying the price.
I think this second round with this curfew will end a lot of businesses in the city, in the province, wherever. It's sad. It's very sad.
Bars and restaurants have only been allowed to reopen relatively recently and with strict rules in place. Some are dealing with big increases in their insurance. In the face of mounting new cases, here are the new rules. Alcohol can't be served past 11, bars and restaurants must close by midnight, and all strip clubs must shut down. There have been outbreaks linked to strip clubs where public health officials struggled to trace people who may have been exposed, and mayors around the province pointed at bars and restaurants as a source of new outbreaks.
It's precautionary. We have to be careful, and I don't think it's unreasonable that the chief medical officer has requested that especially the nightclubs that we've seen outbreaks in a few nightclubs. I don't think it's the end of the world. People stop drinking at 11 and close it down at 12 o'clock.
The industry association says there's no evidence a second wave is being fueled by their members.
The source of the spikes that we're seeing now is not originating from restaurants and bars. It is originating from private parties and private gatherings.
But restaurant and bar owners say they're already hurting because of capacity restrictions. Cutting their hours is going to hurt them more. And they say this may not help curb COVID-19. It could make things worse. This bar owner says he makes the bulk of his cash between 11 at night and 2 in the morning. He doesn't expect customers to stop drinking when he turns off the taps.
There's a good chance that when people are asked to leave at midnight, that the party doesn't stop. People are still going to congregate. They'll end up at someone's apartment where there are no rules.
And while there are restrictions on the number of people allowed in a private social setting, it's hard to enforce what people do in their own homes. Philip Lee, CBC News, Toronto.
About 60 Ontario pharmacies are now offering COVID-19 testing.
This morning itself, I have received about 75 to 100 calls. From today, I've learned my experience. I know exactly what to do, how many staffing to have, and down the road, this is a journey that we are going to learn together.
Residents can get a test at select pharmacies if they're not showing symptoms of COVID-19 and meet certain criteria, including if you've been in contact with a confirmed case or you are working in a high-risk setting. Tests are by appointment only. CBC Toronto checked in with several pharmacies earlier this week before testing began and found many weren't prepared. Several in Toronto said they didn't have the necessary supplies or training. We spoke to some people who gave it a try.
It was a lot better than I thought it was going to be, actually. Very painless, very quick, easy.
There are 500 people ahead of us, so they got our name and number, and they won't test kids 5 and below.
I phoned yesterday, they did a screening, and then when I got there, they had all of my documents, and very smooth.
The government says further locations will be coming online in the next few weeks. Anyone experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 are still advised to go to an assessment center. A COVID-19 outbreak has been declared at a Toronto school. 2 students at Glen Park Public near Lawrence and the Allen have tested positive for the disease. It's the first outbreak at a Toronto school. Meanwhile, TDSB students who have opted to learn at home may have to wait another week to get online. The board still needs to hire another 100 teachers to meet the demand, and they're far from alone. Boards right across the province are desperate to find teachers. So now a plan is going outside the box and back in time for help. Alicia San explains.
This is the letter sent out by the Ontario College of Teachers. Ontario is currently experiencing a shortage of certified teachers, which has been magnified by smaller class sizes during the pandemic. In short, you are needed. Returning to the chalkboard amidst a pandemic is quite the ask.
What did you think reading it?
Well, I thought it was an interesting offer that I'm not doing. I actually retired in 2009, so it's a while now. There are some things I don't miss, but I miss the kids.
He says there's just so much unknown.
It didn't say whether, what you could be going back to online teaching, remote teaching, whatever you want to call it. And that's a very different thing.
So it's a no from Mr. McClellan. Ms. Shopka?
Where are you now?
Manitoba.
Must have been really weird to get this letter, huh?
Yes.
Hypothetically, if you were in the province at the very least, would you consider this?
Absolutely not. Why you would choose this moment to pay your reinstatement fee to the college, pay your annual fee to the college to go and have poor working conditions, they're out to lunch on that one.
The Ontario College of Teachers, which is a regulatory body, has not released a tally of who's taken them up on the idea.
You'll get some. You might get some that are going to go back, but generally, I would say no. They want to help. It's our nature. It's what we've done. It's what we do. My organization is amazing, but they got a way getting in there and helping the kids. And my personal, we're older. We're the high-risk group.
Canada's largest school board, the Toronto District, doesn't plan to rely on retirees. For now, they're continuing to hire from their pool of supply teachers to keep up with the growing demand for virtual school. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Hundreds of young people taking a distant seat in downtown Toronto for climate change. I'm Angelina King. I'll have more on what they want you to know about the environment. That's coming up.
He lost an eye after being beaten by an off-duty Toronto police officer. Today, Devontae Miller presented a victim impact statement about that night in Whitby nearly 4 years ago. Miller saying the assault changed him both physically and mentally. This as sentencing for the officer convicted in his beating got underway. Loretta Redekop with more now from the Oshawa courthouse.
Devontae Miller says he's become withdrawn and isolated, that he suffers from headaches, and the attack has had a devastating and lasting impact on my life. His victim impact statement was read by Crown Attorney Linda Shin, even though Miller was in the courtroom. She also read statements by his family members. Miller suffered severe injuries and was blinded in his left eye following the incident in December of 2016. Off-duty Toronto police officer Michael Theriault was charged, along with his brother Christian, accused of aggravated assault and obstruction of justice. This past June, only Michael Theriault was found guilty of the lesser charge of assault. The judge said he couldn't say for sure that a bloody pipe found at the scene caused the eye injury, but would consider the pipe an aggravating factor in his sentencing. In terms of what Miller would like to see happen, he said jail time, and not just a slap on the wrist, but real jail time. He believes he was the one handcuffed that night because of the color of his skin. If this is going to be my story, I want it to mean something. I want for none of my black brothers and sisters to have this become a part of their story too. The defense told the court this is not a crime that is a racially motivated crime, though did acknowledge larger systemic issues. Michael Lacey read his client's statement in court saying, "I have been vilified, called a racist, and put forward as an example of another police officer abusing his position and targeting a young black man for no reason. That is not who I am." He also said, "I am so sorry that he was severely and permanently injured." Is there anything you did want people to know, given that statement?
I'm sorry, I can't.
The Crown says jail time is warranted. It's asking for 12 to 15 months. The defense called that completely divorced from legal precedent. It also reminded the court Theriault previously had no criminal record and claimed as a police officer in jail, Theriault could be mistreated. The defense called for either a discharge or a suspended or conditional sentence with a maximum 90 days in custody, not served in jail. Michael Theriault is still suspended with pay. He only loses his salary if he's sentenced to jail time. The judge will hand down his sentence on November 5th. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Oshawa.
Construction workers found 2 more nooses at the Michael Garron Hospital site in East York this week. That's on top of 5 nooses found on 4 different construction sites this summer.
I find it absolutely disgusting. There's no room, no tolerance I have in Ontario for any racism. I don't care what racism it is. I have zero tolerance for that, and I won't stand for it. So we're going to catch this person, and we'll bring him to justice.
These latest discoveries happened Thursday. 2 of the previously reported nooses were also found at the same Michael Garron location in June and July. Officials with the construction company say they'll be addressing workers today. They are offering a $5,000 reward for information that leads to the culprit. Hospital officials also say they condemn these acts of racism. Police have been notified they had been investigating the earlier incidents as possible hate crimes. 1 person is in hospital with serious injuries after a daylight shooting in Pickering. Police were called to the scene on Shepherd Avenue near Whites Road. Around 12:30, a 34-year-old man was rushed to hospital with multiple gunshot wounds. The suspect is described as a black man about 5'9", wearing shorts, a black hoodie, and a surgical mask. He was last seen driving a silver or gray Dodge Caliber. A man has died after being found with gunshot wounds early today in Brampton.
What we came onto in the area of Queen and Rutherford, when we came in behind the buildings, we actually came into a trucking yard. And in that enclosed trucking yard, we did locate a male who was suffering from gunshot wounds.
Police received the call just before 7 a.m. The victim is a man in his 30s. Investigators are canvassing the area for surveillance video and any witnesses to what happened. No suspect information has been released. It's been nearly 2 weeks since Mohammed Aslam Zafis was stabbed to death outside a Rexdale mosque. Today, the mosque reopened for prayer for the first time since the killing. It came as the man charged in Zafis' death made a court appearance. Kelly Ewan now with the latest.
A steady stream of people entered the mosque this afternoon as flowers lay by the entrance, the spot where one of their own was tragically killed.
It's beyond words, you know what I mean. Despite what's happened, we have to stay strong.
Shabib Hassan has been coming to this mosque for most of his life.
Yeah, I'm glad that people are still showing up, but I hope that the worst is behind us.
58-year-old Mohammed Aslam Zafis was stabbed and killed on September 12th while guarding the entrance, making sure people entering were following COVID-19 protocols. President of the mosque, Omar Farouk, says many in the congregation are still in disbelief, and he hopes coming together in worship again will bring them solace.
We want to bring about a sense of confidence and stability, and to let the community know that as leaders of the community, we are here for them.
34-year-old Guillaume William von Nudegem has been charged with first-degree murder.
That arrest certainly brought a level of relief to us.
There are calls for the killing to be investigated as a hate crime. Toronto police say they are looking at that possibility after the Canadian Anti-Hate Network uncovered social media posts shared by von Nudegem from a satanic neo-Nazi group.
What we need to do is all of us stand shoulder to shoulder and support the Muslim community and stand up against actions that are so hateful.
I think Toronto is very different. We're very inclusive, and we try to facilitate everybody's beliefs, religions, and so forth. But things like this happen.
Farouk says he has faith in Toronto police and their investigation. In the meantime, he says the mosque will be upgrading its security to ensure members feel safe again.
For example, more additional lighting and more sophisticated security cameras.
Von Newdigem made a brief court appearance today. He is scheduled to appear again via video link on November 5th. Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
For 20 years, the City of Toronto has been trying in vain to collect taxes on a property in one of its ritziest neighborhoods. That bill for the Forest Hill property has now ballooned to more than $600,000. And as Farah Morelli shows us, no one seems to know who's responsible for paying it.
Welcome to 275 Forest Hill Road. No, not the mansion to the left, but this 7,000 square foot patch of grass to the right. According to city records, the owners aren't exactly up to date on their property taxes. They're behind by more than 20 years.
So how much is actually owed according to the file?
The actual taxes that are outstanding is about $620,000 for that property.
We did some digging and found the last owner of the property. Kilberry Land Company bought the lot back in 1921, but the company went bankrupt 63 years ago. So technically, there hasn't been an official owner since, which is why the city hasn't been able to collect the money.
Given that this company's been bankrupt for so long, why did it take the city this long to actually get to this stage?
The fact of the matter is that the city administers and oversees 850,000 properties, so almost 1 million properties in the city of Toronto. We certainly do not do inspections of properties on a regular basis.
Experts say parcels of land with no clear owner aren't unusual.
In the city of Toronto, it is quite common that you get what we call orphaned pieces of land, which is basically land which has been either overlooked or just kind of fallen away in the pages of history. No one really knows who the owner is.
Today, the lot is fenced, and it appears only the neighboring mansion has access to the lot. We reached out to them for comment, but didn't get a response. The city says it's looking at its options. One is to issue a tax arrears certificate, which gives the owner a year to come forward and pay up. If not,
and we proceed to a tax sale. So I would say that would be very likely that the city will be proceeding to do that.
if this parcel of land behind me ends up going to a tax sale, the minimum price would be what's owed to the city, so around $620,000. Seems like a steal for a slice of land in Forest Hill, right? Well, don't get too excited. It would go to the highest bidder, and the current estimated value of that land is a cool $3.5 million. Farah Morelli, CBC News, Toronto.
Just a cool $3 million there. Remember, if you have a story you would like us to look into, just send us an email, torontotips@cbc.ca. I'm sorry I questioned you, Colette. I'm sorry I was doubting you, but man, you delivered.
Yeah, some nice conditions, right? And boy, we're going into a nice weekend as well. You know, it was just a little tricky today because in those morning hours, we had some of that fog and mist that was a little dense and it kind of held in there. We've got a bit of a temperature inversion because of that high pressure that's in place. It's what helps us out with the sunshine, but it also takes a while for some of that fog to kind of burn off. So the high today in Toronto, just 24 degrees because it was about noon before we could really start to see that sun helping us out. But lots of readings were into the mid-20s, and we should do pretty well with those temperatures into Saturday and even Sunday as well. Might be even a little bit better. Southwesterly breeze will be picking up though tomorrow, but that's going to help out with those temperatures. Not much humidity. These are your humidex values, but there will be Saturday and Sunday. Those are going to go up into the low 30s. So that high pressure, it is what gives us the clearer skies other than when we get into that patchy fog, which is essentially some of that low-level stratus cloud. So there is that ridge of high pressure that is in place, why we see the clearer conditions. Those do hang on for Saturday and most of Sunday. There's a few areas that'll be impacted, so you got to come back a little later in the show, and I'm going to walk you through what I mean by that. Overnight tonight, 15 for the low. Tomorrow afternoon, Dwight, how about 26 degrees? Does that sound good? Feel okay for you?
You're looking good, kid. We'll check back with you in a bit.
I like the kid part.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
The Liberals and the NDP have reached a deal on sick leave. The Trudeau government is going to expand the number of people who can claim paid sick days. It clears the way for the New Democrats to support the throne speech and bypass a snap fall election.
Today marks the first step in achieving the first ever in the history of our country federal paid sick leave for Canadian workers. And it's the first step towards our ultimate goal of ensuring all Canadian workers have paid sick leave from now and forever. So today is a historic moment where we have, in the first time ever in this country's history, established a federal paid sick leave. And I'm really proud that this is going to help so many Canadian workers. People who are worried about getting sick in this pandemic will now know when this legislation passes that there will be paid sick leave for them.
The spike of COVID-19 cases this week has made the need for a vaccine all the more urgent. And today, the Prime Minister announced that Canada has signed up for another one of the promising candidates. David Cochran explains.
None of the vaccines being developed are ready for use, but when they are, the Prime Minister wants to make sure Canada is prepared.
We've reached an agreement with AstraZeneca for the vaccine they are developing with the University of Oxford. This agreement secures up to 20 million doses for Canadians should the vaccine trials be successful.
That means Canada now has deals to secure up to 282 million doses of the 6 leading vaccine candidates, ensuring a supply once a vaccine gets the green light. Stockpiling options for a way out of a pandemic that is getting worse by the day.
An average of 1,175 cases have been reported daily across Canada during the most recent 7 days. We are continuing to see an increase in daily case counts nationally.
The focus remains sharply on the health crisis at home, but Trudeau is also making a big investment in the global fight against COVID, giving $440 million to a global procurement initiative to get vaccine doses for Canadians and to send millions of doses to low-income countries.
This pandemic can't be solved by any one country alone, because to eliminate the virus anywhere, we need to eliminate it everywhere.
None of this means vaccine doses are on the way. They still need to get through clinical trials and get regulatory approval. These deals guarantee a spot in the line that once a vaccine is ready, Canada can get its share. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
Teenage environmental activist Greta Thunberg and fellow demonstrators staged a protest in front of Sweden's parliament today. It was to mark the Global Day of Action Against Climate Change.
The climate crisis has never once been treated as a crisis, and unless we treat it as a crisis, we won't be able to so-called solve it.
Young activists around the world are taking part in a series of protests. All are confined to small gatherings because of COVID-19. The 16-year-old Thunberg began the Fridays for Future movement in 2018. It started when she began protesting outside the Swedish parliament on school days. Thunberg received her second consecutive Nobel Peace Prize nomination earlier this year. And those events inspired by Greta Thunberg took place here in Toronto, too. The intersection of Bay and Wellesley was blocked for much of the afternoon as people demonstrated. Last year's youth climate strike saw thousands march through downtown, but this year's event was quite a bit different amid the pandemic. Our Angelina King was there.
What do we want? Climate justice! When do we want it? Now!
This is what a climate protest looks like during a global pandemic. Instead of marching, a distanced sit-in on X's 2 meters apart, hand sanitizer, masks, and other safety precautions. Still a presence.
The youth are back. We're back in the streets. We're back with our message.
That message, an urgent call to governments to take immediate, tangible action against climate change.
We want to remind our leaders that we've not forgotten the promises that they've made and that we're here to help hold them accountable. And I know it's something that every generation does, but I think that our generation really understands the emergency that we're in.
Even though this year's event is a lot smaller and they're staying in one spot here at this intersection in downtown Toronto, participants say that doesn't mean that they aren't as engaged as they were before, and their demands are just as loud.
I want clean water. I want clean water for my community. I want clean water for the communities up north.
It's just important for us to talk about it and confront it.
This year's event comes on the heels of the throne speech, which organizers say was a letdown.
It will also include fighting climate change.
The Liberals promised climate action will help create more jobs and renewed a promise to reach net zero emissions by 2050. But organizers want that target closer to 2030.
By 2050, I'm going to be an adult. I don't know what kind of world I'm going to be living in.
It's not just teens demanding change. Ann Pennington says she remembers similar sentiments in the 70s and says more should have been done then. Now she finds young activists inspiring, but
it's not fair that it's on their shoulders. They're just kids. And it's really my generation. It's the last 30, 50 years that we should have been doing things differently, and we weren't. We were burning carbon like there was no tomorrow, and it turns out there's no tomorrow.
People here are hopeful that if all generations work together, tomorrow will be better. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
For the first time in 4 years, your Toronto Blue Jays will play in the postseason. The Jays clinched a playoff berth last night with a 4-1 victory over those hated New York Yankees. Of course, because of the pandemic, we didn't see the kind of celebration around the city we've seen in past years, but the Jays did plenty of celebrating on their own at their temporary home in Buffalo. Greg Ross has more.
On the way, swing and a miss, he got it. Rafael Dolis finishes it off.
And with that, the Blue Jays clinched a playoff berth for the first time since 2016.
Great job, players. Big play.
The cheers continued in a virtual post-game press conference.
Awesome.
One of my boys here.
Woo! We did it!
That's right.
The team wore T-shirts that said "Respect Toronto." Manager Charlie Montoyo explained why.
I wish we were in Toronto right now, seeing all those fans celebrating with us, you know, and so I want them to know that we're thinking of them right now, you know, because this victory is for the city of Toronto and Canada. You are number one.
This is what it looked like back in 2015 when the Blue Jays clinched a playoff spot.
And we certainly didn't see that buzz we've seen in past years around the Rogers Centre today, a day after clinching that playoff berth. In fact, it was downright quiet.
It's harder to get on the bandwagon when, you know, you don't see people walking around in the jerseys as much and the bars aren't full.
It's not the same, but you got to learn how to bond together, celebrate together, and still enjoy it.
And that's exactly what the Blue Jays had to do all season, playing in a bubble during a pandemic, even starting the season without a home until they landed in Buffalo, where they won last night.
It's been a crazy year, not only for us, but for everybody. And, you know, we could have easily looked at it in a negative way, but, you know, we didn't. We took it with a little bit of a chip on our shoulder, and we played with a little bit of an edge.
Is it safe to say that the Blue Jays kind of beat the odds a little bit?
I think that's safe to say.
Ben Nicholson-Smith covers the Blue Jays for Sportsnet.ca. He says in a season that has already been like no other, the Jays have nothing to lose going into the playoffs.
They're kind of playing with house money. They have already had, I think, by any definition, a successful season. To get this far, to make it to the playoffs, to have this many success stories, they have had a successful season. So now, if they can win a couple series, that's essentially gravy.
And Montoyo says his team won't take their success for granted.
Just go and play and have fun. Enjoy it. That's what we're going to do. We're going to enjoy it every minute of it.
The postseason gets underway October 5th. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
COVID-19 zoned in on the most vulnerable in Ontario, especially those in our long-term care homes. But it also exposed issues that were there before the pandemic happened. We'll show you what they are after the break. Nowhere in this province has felt the effects of the pandemic like long-term care homes. But did it have to be that way? CBC's Marketplace analyzed more than 30,000 violations documented by government inspectors before the pandemic. They show COVID-19 didn't just create issues in long-term care facilities, it exposed some that were already there. Here's David Common.
This is Orchard Villa calling to provide an update. We understand you may have seen the media coverage this week regarding our long-term care community and that you are concerned about your loved ones.
As the pandemic entered its deadliest phase, robocalls were the only source of info from inside Orchard Villa.
We have asked for assistance from our local health care partners to address our staffing issues.
More people would die here than anywhere else in Ontario, but we can reveal the home was already among the most problematic before COVID hit. Dozens of warnings from government inspectors, year after year, violations repeated.
Well, good afternoon.
With COVID, Ontario's premier promised it would be different.
We're putting an iron ring of protection around our seniors, especially those in long-term care.
But more than a year earlier, the Ford government ended its most detailed surveillance of nursing homes called Resident Quality Inspections, or RQIs.
They are very detailed. They take a long time, they take a lot of staff, and they're expensive. Under this government, they've decided to look at complaints and critical incidents.
And that, says lawyer and elder advocate Jane Meadis, left care homes further weakened just before the pandemic.
Am I right in saying the government has moved from a system where they proactively looked to see if there were problems in a place to one that only responded after the problems happened?
That's correct.
And now, CBC News has learned the government's own documents from 2015 warned the since-cancelled inspections were up to 5 times more thorough than what's replaced them, and were much more likely to identify infection control problems. Their cancellation, critics warn, left homes unprepared for what happened next.
Once you got inside Orchard Villa, what concerns did you have?
Severe concern by the nursing staff.
What were they concerned about?
Not being prepared, and that something very ugly was coming.
Nurse Kathy Legier is an infection control expert. She volunteered to come out of retirement and was hired on at the home to help.
When you saw that some people were going to get sick in rooms where others weren't, what did you suggest and what did they do?
When COVID first dangled its toe in Orchard Villa, it was in a 4-bedroom. And so immediately my thought is, you've got to get that patient out.
But Kathy says management ignored her warnings.
So it didn't happen?
It didn't happen.
So
2
the
days
stakes-
later, the infectious person was still in with the other 3 who were now positive as well. No big surprise.
In the year before COVID, with detailed inspections eliminated, we can reveal infection control violations dropped dramatically by 68%.
We are seeing fewer violations that are being caught because the complaint inspections requires a resident or some other person to make a complaint. Is the home really going to tell on itself? They don't. And we see this over and over and over again. So there is nothing being done to proactively prevent homes from going down a bad path.
The government's new inspections are uncovering nearly 1/3 fewer problems overall. And when problems aren't found, they can fester. So we're taking a detailed look inside Orchard Villa once COVID hit.
At the time when they called me, I could hear her like moaning and yelling in the background.
Bryce Russell got the call in the middle of the night. His mother Lorraine inside Orchard Villa had fallen.
They found her on the ground, pillow between her knees, head up against the bed.
She's injured, sent by ambulance to hospital.
The doctor was telling me that mom was now malnourished. Her prognosis wasn't very good.
Why hadn't staff noticed? Under the more detailed inspection regime, the home had been told to shape up.
They've actually been cited, warned by the ministry 7 times over just 4 years. April 2016, resident not transferred to hospital after a fall until the next day. July 2015, family of a resident not notified of a fall with injury until about 7 hours after the decision was made to transfer that person to hospital.
Yeah, exactly. So they're obviously not equipped, not paying attention, or don't care.
He and Kathy Legier are among many families and staff now suing Orchard Villa over its actions and inactions. As the death toll climbs inside Orchard Villa, the military is called in and reports caregiver burnout amongst the overwhelmed staff. And at Orchard Villa, they'd had problems for years.
What can you tell me about the conditions at Orchard Villa before COVID?
Before COVID, staffing-wise, we're always short.
We're protecting the identity of this Orchard Villa staffer.
The typical shifts we have in the morning, if you don't have enough staff, you have to call the supervisor to tell them you're short.
How often is that happening?
Often.
Really? Like?
Almost every day.
Almost every day you're short-staffed?
Yeah.
Why did it take the military going into these 5 homes to highlight these problems?
I know that there was a crisis. It took the military to be there 24/7. That's when you find out there's cracks in the system, by living the system around the clock every single day.
Should politicians be shocked by what they're seeing?
The politicians should not have been shocked. The premier should have known these things were happening.
Should have known because Orchard Villa had been cited for 148 violations in 5 years.
The ministry inspectors found problems in 2015, grime in washrooms, cobwebs, dead bugs, dirty beds and seating. And then those same things, those same violations are repeated the next year and the year after that. Does it surprise you?
No, and those are harsh findings. But at the end of the day, if an infraction notice has no teeth, what's your motivation to change? If it's going to cost you money to change.
What about the motivation to save lives?
That should be forefront.
In a statement, Orchard Villa, run by Southbridge Care Homes, says they've hired a new dedicated recruiter to address staffing challenges, adding new expertise to strengthen infection prevention and control initiatives, but won't discuss specific experiences for the privacy of our residents.
Meanwhile, the province tells us every home is inspected at least once a year, though since the cancellation of those more detailed inspections, the frequency and intensity of reviews is now determined by risk. So something has to go wrong at a home before inspectors show up.
A lot went wrong at Orchard Villa, and Kathy tried to speak up, but says her advice was ignored.
Not having someone with your expertise in there, did that cost lives?
I think I could have significantly helped soften the blow. Sorry. And later at home watching it on the news, I just wanted to be there. I just wanted to be there and be helping. It's all I wanted to do. Yep.
Seeing problems, but helpless to change them, and the pandemic still looms, swelling cases, threatening care homes once more. David Common, CBC News, Pickering, Ontario.
Hopefully lessons have been learned. Toronto police say they've now made a link between 2 separate shootings last night, one of which was deadly. That shooting happened near Jane and Steeles around 8:30 p.m. 57-year-old Anthony Martin of Maple was pronounced dead at the scene. Another victim was taken to hospital and is expected to survive. Investigators say they are looking for 4 suspects. They believe 3 of them opened fire on the victims. The suspects fled in a silver 4-door sedan. Police now believe the same 4 suspects were behind the shooting about 2 hours earlier. That incident happened near Jane and Driftwood just after 6 p.m. No one was injured. Police say they've located an abandoned Toyota Corolla, which they believe is connected to the shootings. The annual Ryerson Student Powwow looks a little different this year. Instead of in person, it's through a screen.
It's still important that we have that connection to language, culture, and ceremony.
We'll take you to the virtual powwow a little later in the show. So what do you have for us for the first weekend of fall, Colette?
I don't know, something kind of more like a weekend in summer.
Summer, yes. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, it just sort of seems like that's what we have. You know, we have a pretty dominant ridge of high pressure that's in place, and it's doing mostly good things for us. The current temperatures, they look like this, so it's a really nice Friday evening that is upon us. 23 degrees for Toronto, Hamilton at 24, and St. Catharines holding in there with mid-20s, 25 right now. And for now, the humidity is relatively low. I think there was one point today I saw Markham, your temperature was at 25 and your humidex value was at 30. Well, as we go into the weekend, we're going to find those humidex values in the mid-afternoon point are going to be in the low 30s. So there will be a little bit of stickiness. I mean, considering we are now into fall, so you'll feel that a little bit. High pressure, I say, is the dominant force that we're feeling. And one thing it is doing, sometimes when it sticks around like this, we get a bit of an inversion, so a temperature inversion. You'd expect as you're going up into the atmosphere, the temperatures would be getting cooler. Well, we get a little bit of a flip-flop. And so when we get that and it gets a little bit warmer, things can kind of get trapped and we don't get the mixing of the atmosphere. And that kind of happened today. So we had some of that mist and fog. It was pretty dense in some areas, took a little while to burn off. And that's why we only got to 24 degrees. I mean, that's still pretty good, Toronto, but we might have got a little bit warmer had we got rid of some of that fog a little bit earlier. Still plenty of sunshine, and we will have a little patchy fog again tomorrow, but then likely getting into some good sunshine. The winds are going to be a little breezy out of the southwest. Because of that, that's going to help mix the atmosphere a little bit too. But you can see, especially along the lakeshore there, some fog into the morning. Into Saturday looks good. Most of Sunday looks good. I do just want to point out, by about 5 p.m. into Sunday afternoon, especially towards cottage country, could have a few areas picking up some showers and then some heavier downpours into Sunday night. So if you're planning to make the trek down the 400 there Sunday night, you could get into some wet conditions. Overnight tonight, mild temperatures. Yeah, really mild temperatures, looking good with those southwesterly winds. Tomorrow highs around 26, 27 by the time we get to Sunday. Gets wet, cools down next week. Who cares? Concentrate on this beautiful weekend that we have coming up here.
I'm going to hit the bike on the trails this weekend with the fall colors and that temperature. I'm good. Thank you, Colette.
Yeah, get that wind hit your back tomorrow, Dwight.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Colette.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm Ismaila Alpha, host of Metro Morning. Coming up on Monday's show, we explore the idea of a national child care system. We'll speak with a researcher and advocate who's been pushing for this for the past 50 years and find out whether she believes the government will come through on it this time. Martha Friendly is my guest on Metro Morning. Join me weekdays from 5:30 till 8:30 on CBC Radio 1.
The annual Ryerson University Student Powwow took place today, but it was like any other. Instead of being hosted inside Ryerson's quad, it was live streamed on YouTube. Video producer Richard Adjudique spoke to a few people who were taking part, including a mother and daughter.
And take it away, Black Bull Moose Singers.
Well, we just had our first digital powwow here at Ryerson. Because of the pandemic, we felt it was the safest way for us to kind of recreate that sense of community. So, yeah, we still really wanted to do something even in spite of COVID-19.
A lot of Indigenous peoples don't grow up in their communities or on reserve. They grow up in urban settings. So powwows are a great opportunity to return to your community and get a taste of the culture that you maybe didn't grow up with. And it's really just a chance to meet your relations and to learn about our ceremonies and perhaps participate in the dancing and really just reconnect with each other.
The role of the MC at a powwow is to kind of keep the powwow moving and keep it going and flowing and keep that good energy going in the space, and you know, just making sure everyone's involved and the dancers are dancing and you know, things are just rolling smoothly and there aren't a lot of queer women being MCs at powwows, so that was also something that kind of held me back a little bit, but Denise is my bestie and she said yes. So I was like, why not? Let's make this thing work.
The head dancer is the center of the powwow. They help encourage folks to dance as well as bring community in and to ask questions about dancing.
It's hard to explain because when you're powwow dancing, you go into like a whole nother zone. And it's like you're there, but you're not there because it's like meditating in a sense. Like your head is clear.
We weren't allowed to practice our culture. We were actually jailed if we would try to congregate more than a couple people. So it's very important for us to practice our traditions and ceremonies.
And it's very important to like pass those teachings down on to the younger ones who are starting to powwow dance too.
I think especially at Ryerson, considering the history of the person that is named after, like the institution is named after, for me every time I walk by that statue, I'm just like, you didn't succeed. I'm still here, I'm still authentically Indigenous, my children are still authentically Indigenous, and I'm a part of academia.
One of my favorite aspects of powwow is the drums and the sounds that emanate from powwows and the smells from a sacred fire that's burning at a powwow. And to me, that's especially important in an urban location and at a school like Ryerson University in downtown Toronto. It's really incredible to feel that energy from a place that's, you know, buried in concrete and smog and the hustle and bustle of the city. It demonstrates that Indigenous peoples are resilient, and no matter what situations we are, no matter where we're located, or the global health crises that are impacting our people, we will continue to dance and we'll continue to drum and sing and celebrate. And it's just so beautiful to me.
So call it the Sunday drive back from Cottage Country. Cottage Country may be wet, but we're good otherwise?
Yeah, we're looking really good otherwise. You know, tomorrow morning there could be a few areas with a little bit of that dense fog again, so reduced visibility. So that's kind of the beginning of the weekend. And then at the other end, there could be some areas, yeah, with a little bit of those downpours that could reduce your visibility coming home at the end of the weekend. But overnight tonight, low 15. Tomorrow, 26. The breeze, a little gusty, those winds out of the southwest, but have a look at it. 26, maybe even 27 with some of those highs on Sunday. A beautiful first weekend of fall. If you're wondering how I feel about white after Labor Day, Dwight, here's your answer right there.
They can't tell you how to dress.
Well,
You're the
especially when
best
it's
dressed
like
people
this.
on TV, Miss Collins. That's our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here Monday at 6. Have a great weekend, everybody.